Hello, everyone. I am Tanya Lynn, the founder of Sistership Circle, and here we are on the 11th week, and this is all about how we are relating to our children. So this is for our children this week, and this is such a special topic for me because right now, as we're recording, I have 3 weeks until my due date for my first baby. Yay!
Yay, Mama!
And really, where this is coming from this week is that I realized with the new generation feminine leader and all this work that we're doing as women, what are we doing it for, right? And what came through for me is the next 7 generations. And I start the book talking about this, and it's just this piece of like who us as women, and this is a huge part of us as women, like is the ability to give birth, and so this idea of creating and stepping into our power and being leaders so that we can support this earth for the next 7 generations. And so when I was looking at this concept, it became very clear to me that I was like, well, what about my next generation, right? And I got really, really present to that, and then I was pregnant. So and there's a piece here that we're going to be talking about. So we're going to be talking about that with our guests today, and we're also going to be talking about our relationship with our little girl or our inner child. If you're a man and watching this, your inner child. And there's something that's related, I think, that the more that we get in touch with our inner child, the more we get in touch with the children that are out there in the world. So I'm going to start today, and then we're going to jump right in with my book, How to Be a New Generation Feminine Leader. And this is a letter that I wrote to baby Tanya, to my little girl. So, you are safe. I've got you. You could come curl up in a ball with your blanket next to me. I've got you. I'll stroke your hair and hold you tight. I've got you. It's okay to cry. It's okay to be scared. The world seems big and overwhelming to you. I've got you. I see you. You are so ambitious and hardworking. You are so smart and athletic. I am impressed with how much you strive to learn. And it's okay if you mess up. I've got you. I hear you. You so badly want to be heard. You want to know that your voice matters, that what you say is equally important. I've got you. I love you. I am so glad you were born. You are so special. You could do anything in this world. I've got you. I've got you. I'm not going anywhere. I'm holding you. You can trust me. I love you. Love, Tanya. So I want to introduce the amazing Renee Jeffus, who's here with me. And we saw her in the Sistership Circle virtual festival. She was on one of our panels, and so you can, if you haven't heard of that, you can go watch that panel at sistershipcircle.com. And so when I asked the ladies from the panels if any of them wanted to be interviewed, Renee raised her hand and said, yes, I want to talk about our children. So I'm excited because you've got, what, 3 kids?
I have 3 children. Yeah. One is
Yeah.
about to graduate from high school, and then my youngest is 3. So I got a broad range, and it's definitely one of my biggest devotions in life is being a mother. Yeah.
Good. So we're going to dive into that. So welcome, Renee. And
Thank
let's start with just tell everyone who you are and what you're up to in the world in terms of the work that you're doing, and that way everyone gets a context, and then we'll just dive in.
Sure. Well, it's such a pleasure to be here with you again, Tanya. I loved the interview and leadership panel that we did before. It was wonderful to be here with you then, and it's great to be back. And this is definitely one of my dearest to my heart topics and aspects of my life. So it's beautiful to be here, specifically around motherhood and our children, and also mothering our own little child. So I'm Renee Jeffus, and I am the creator and director of the Revolutionary Radiance movement, which is a movement that's based on the truth that when we women really step into radical self-love and radical for ourselves and our sisters and our daughters and all people, really. But when the feminine really steps into who we are and becomes more bold in our ability to share that, shine that, and live that in the world, that is one of the greatest gifts that we as women can give in our entire lives, that ability to really embody the sacred feminine and bring the experience of the living goddess for ourselves in our own lives, but then also for our beloveds, our children, our partners, our husbands, our families, and our communities. When we get to shine and share and show up as the sacred feminine and in that natural radiance and power that is ours as women, it's just a blessing for the whole world. So that's part of what I'm up to. I'm just enjoying that work with my clients and with programs and retreats and that kind of thing, and then just co-creating amazing things in the world with fellow leadership women like yourself, bringing great role modeling. It really, this word model has been really kind of poignant for me, especially because I used to model for many years, and then to reclaim that word, right? To reclaim, well, what does it really mean to model to the world an empowered and embodied woman? And so it's part of what I'm up to. That and raising my 3 kids.
And I really want to start there with role model, because that's the thing that's come through really powerfully for me, is as feminine leaders and as women who are coming together to support one another, the authenticity piece is about being that role model. And you know, when we think about the next 7 generations, or we think about our next generation and who we being, it's role modeling, right? It's and that's, I think, the biggest piece that I've been looking at for myself as stepping into a mother. And so what is, you know, and I think you just said, you know, like really teaching women how to be that model, right? So I'd love to hear from you of what does that look like?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I think you spoke straight to it when you talked about the authenticity piece. To me, that is number one, right? That aspect of being so authentic and discovering what that even means, right? We're all living in a culture where there's so much media and so much pressure to be a certain way, to have value, to be sexy, or whatever the stories are that you know, kind of the culture continues with the idea of what it means to be a woman. It's really about getting beyond all of that, letting all of that pressure and letting all of those things fall away, which is really no small task. I mean, we're inundated with it from the time that we're, you know, so young, and our mothers were as well. So a big part of what is happening right now, I think, is that we're actually all discovering. We're really discovering what it even means to be an authentic woman, right? What does it mean to have this full range of emotions? What does it mean to be in our authentic sensuality and sexuality? What does authentic power feel like from a more feminine place? You know, because it certainly isn't the power over or the competition or the kind of, you know, be the top dog kind of thing that we've all been raised with. So the biggest piece is a discovery piece. It's a discovering what is authentic to each individual woman, and that process of discovery is so beautiful, and that process is based in radical self-love. So when we can really embrace all of who we are, forgive ourselves for those times that we may wear the masks, or, you know, catch ourselves in the automatic behavior patterns, whatever it is, but to really authentically love, embrace, forgive, and empower ourselves as women. It's really the foundational pieces is that radical self-love and authenticity. And then for what it looks like, you know, what it looks like from there is infinite. And, you know, the feminine in her fullness is vast, vast, vast. So it's just a discovery, and it's one that I'm so excited to be on in my own life, and then also to be with you and with others and with all of the sisters. It really feels like this is what the feminine is up to, right? It feels like the feminine is really up to discovering and living what it means to be an authentic woman.
Yes, and there was a thought that just came up for me around guilt. And this is something that I see a lot of women, this I'm too much, or I'm doing it wrong.
Right.
And well, they're two separate things. And the biggest one that was coming up for me is when we talk about motherhood and how many women kind of beat themselves up and you know, I'm doing it wrong. And I had this come up during my pregnancy. I've talked about this before, but around eating sugar. And my midwife said, you know, Tanya, you're fine. Like, you're super healthy. And she picked you. She picked you with all your flaws. She picked you with your sugar addiction.
Right.
You know, and let yourself off the hook.
Yeah.
You know, and cut it back, but let yourself off the hook. And I think that's something that you're talking about, is this radical self-love. And so I would love to hear from you. Did you struggle with this as a mother in feeling guilty?
I did.
You're like, yeah, of course.
I did, and I do, and it's, for me, probably my mothering is the place where guilt and shame and who I should be shows up the strongest, right? Because I'm so emotionally invested. I love my children so much that I want to show up the best that I can. And so, you know, there's a lot of the shouldings happening and a lot of the beating myself up that I could be doing it better, or I could have made better choices, or this or that, or whatever it is. And it's certainly one of the areas where that comes in, I think, the strongest for women, because we are so devoted to our children, and there's so much collective pressure of what a mother should look like, should behave like, should, you know, all the shoulds, right? They're really, really strong around mothering, and even to break away from what is kind of the norm. I just really acknowledge you for your courage with home birth, right? With birthing with a midwife and home birth. I had all three of my children at home. My oldest was born when I was 24 years old, and so, you know, almost 18 years ago, home births were even more unnormal, as they still are. and I faced so much concern and criticism when I made that choice. I mean, my very own family was so critical of it and so concerned with it, and just hammering me with, like, how can you be doing this? You're putting, you know, yourself at risk. And, you know, there's so many misconceptions around home birth and the safety of it and all of that. And now my mother is actually one of the biggest supporters of home births on the planet, like, seriously. So there, you know, there's something about having to really reach so deep inside of ourselves as women, and to access a more primal place of motherhood that's really rooted in love. It's really rooted in our own internal wisdom as women, because you know, so much of what we are taught and conditioned to believe in society might not be what's true for us as mothers. It might not be what's true for our children. And so it really requires this incredible core strength as a woman. It's like practicing that muscle of deep inner listening and connecting with that internal wisdom that is in every woman, to be able to birth our children naturally, to be able to raise our kids making the decisions that we in our bones and our blood can feel is right. And sometimes that's not going to be what is accepted by society. And that's when that real, once again, that real self-love comes in. Because even our own conditioning will question us, our own concerns of what other people think. You know, all of that plays out so strongly in the realm of motherhood. It's a big one. I still, I'm on raising my third little one, and I still, there's still a lot of areas that I have to cultivate the gentleness with myself, cultivate the okayness with not getting it perfect. There's no such thing, right? There really is no such thing as the perfect mother, the perfect child, the perfect life. It's an illusion that kind of keeps us in that guilt place or in that trap of trying so hard to do it right. And so we just have to soften out of that as much as possible.
And so when you talk about being more gentle with yourself, is there anything specific that you do or say to yourself, or, can you give an example of that? Because I think sometimes women are like,
sure,
how do I be gentle with myself?
Right. Well, honestly, one of the tools that I really utilize on a day-to-day basis is by really being with my body in a loving way. So I know that if I'm in a state of tension, if I'm carrying tension in my body, if I'm getting tension headaches, if I'm, kind of feeling that like kind of ratty or more angular, kind of wound up, tense place, I know that something is going on inside of myself that is either, overworking or over kind of beating myself up for something. So I use my body and my state of pleasure and relaxation as a constant gauge. So I'm just checking in with that throughout the day. I'm just checking in with how relaxed am I in my body, how at ease do I feel, am I allowing pleasure to be my friend right now, right? So it's just a different mode of kind of just continually gauging and operating in the world, just to check that state of pleasure and embodiment, and then whatever the simple tools are that help bring us into a greater state of ease and pleasure. So for me, it's my breath. For me, it's a few moments of my bare feet on the earth, or it's just taking a time out myself, where I'll go and I'll crawl in my bed, I'll light a candle, I'll burn some sage or some Palo Santo, and I'll just breathe and I'll relax and I'll one hand on my heart, one hand over my deep belly womb space, and I'll just listen. I think it's really it's not always easy to be with ourselves. So much of the world is up here, right? So much of the world is in the future and trying to meet goals and get deadlines done and rush here and rush there. And if we can actually start conditioning ourselves in a different way to approach life from a very childlike, innocent place, playfulness, pleasure, enjoyment, ease. Sometimes that means being slow and not filling our calendars so much. Those are a lot of the little tools and tricks that I like to use. Be like a child, like my children.
Yeah, and I started this with my little letter to my inner child, and kind of heard from a couple people that when you become a mother, that a lot of your stuff from that age comes up, like with whatever age your child is.
Right.
Your stuff comes up, and so there's a healing opportunity for your little girl. And I just love what you shared about, like, getting back in touch with the innocence, and the gentleness comes from reconnecting with the innocence of your little girl and the playfulness of her. And there's a softening when I think about when I was 2, 3, 4, 5. There's that for me as an access to the gentleness of, like, oh wow, like little adorable Tanya, who's so innocent and just wanted to play outside all the time, and I never looked at like getting in touch with my pleasure. We talked about pleasure as access to your self-care with Liana in week 4. So if anyone's watching and wants to go, see that video, week 4 with Liana Silver. But I haven't really actually thought about relating like gentleness and innocence and playfulness and pleasure. And so when you just said being barefoot on the earth, I'm like, Oh my God, that was my whole childhood.
Yeah.
I was always outside barefoot. I hated shoes.
Yeah.
Um,
I think most kids do. Except for the little like
and
dress-up ones once in a while, you know.
yeah, but there's like that that is so pleasure, like there's pleasure in the sensation. Like pleasure is the sensual, it's the sensation, it's the
Right.
feeling. And when we can feel good like that, you know, and then there's this um, innocence in when we're connected in that way, right?
Right. Oh yeah. It's really about reclaiming the innocence of being embodied, right? I mean,
Say more about that.
if you're around little babies or little children, I mean, we start to get it conditioned out of us pretty early on because, you know, being appropriate and what's appropriate and, you know, this and that, and just, you know, we just from an early age we start getting taught appropriate behaviors, you know, and it might not be appropriate at a dinner party for a little girl to just be like, I'm going to kick my shoes off and I'm having so much fun and I'm so playful and I'm in my silliness and my giddiness, and you know, it usually starts to get dampened down pretty young. But if you think about it, when you look at young babies, and young children, 2, 3, 4, they are in such a state of constant wonder, right? Constant wonderment. And it's through the body, it's through their senses, right? I mean, little children are so acutely alive in their bodies. That is our natural state, right? And it is a natural state of profound pleasure and sensitivity. So, you know, unfortunately, sometimes pleasure, you know, because of the puritanical roots that so much of us come from in the Western society and you know, still kind of, you know, working its way around what is, you know, what is good pleasure, what is bad pleasure, what is, you know, hedonistic, what is, you know, all this stuff around sexuality, right? Unfortunately, just the purity and the innocence of pleasure in the body has kind of gotten, you know, somewhat thrown out, baby with the bathwater, right? So it's really about calling that state of heightened awareness. In the ancient traditions, in the ancient tantric traditions, they call it tremoring vibration, being in a state of tremoring vibration. So it's where our presence is so acutely embodied that we're feeling and we're sensing everything, right? And the joy that is in that is the joy that you see young children running around barefoot or half naked outside, rolling around in the grass, having no inhibitions about cuddling and snuggling with someone they just met 5 minutes ago, you know, whatever it is. But you see the innocence of embodiment and of pleasure in young children. So for me, part of my life path has been about really rediscovering that, right? Like so letting go of and moving through the patterns that, you know, kind of started to kink up my ability to be really free in my body, my ability to be in a state of pleasure and innocence in my body, and to feel safe in that, right? To feel safe in that as a grown woman. So there's this real core practice, if you will, core pathway of really reclaiming our innocence through the path of our senses, so through the path of embodiment in our senses, and finding the innocence of the pleasure in that. It's really sweet. It's like being like childlike. You know, there's all these quotes. I mean, Jesus has, you know, was quoted as saying, "Be childlike to enter heaven." I know that, like, just a lot of the great teachers have talked about the innocence of children, and part of that innocence, I believe, that they're speaking to is this level of innocence, the level of embodied innocence and sensory awareness and heightened experience of life. So it's about, you know, recultivating that, reawakening that, reconnecting with that for ourselves and for our children, and the, you know, the children just love it. I mean, you know, my kids, when I'm, and I, you know, I am a busy mama. I run a business on my own. I'm single mama of the 3 of them, and so, you know, they get to experience me, unfortunately, more often than I would like, in a state of more stress and more tension and being overly busy or rushing from here or there, having my schedule too tight. And then they also get to experience mom and her full vitality and aliveness and joy and ease and laughter. And it's no question, what do our children prefer? What really nourishes them? What really nourishes them is when we connect with our true essence and our innocence and that ability to be in a state of pleasure and innocence and joy and embodiment right there with them. Right? Yeah.
Mm. And I think this, kind of full circle here of the modeling, the role modeling. Like, for me, the feminine leader and who we're striving to be as women and reclaiming what it means to be a woman is to model that for our children, to reclaim our innocence, to be able to feel, to have that heightened sense of awareness of the joy and the excitement to be alive. That's what the planet needs right now. Like, that is, I think, for the next 7 generations. Right. Like, that's that piece right there is, and that's so much of, like, what we're doing in Sistership Circle. That, in San Diego, when we do our meetings here, so much like cuddling, and women want to show up in their pajamas, and it's like a big slumber party, and the women are always like, when are we doing our slumber party? Because there's something about us women coming together that we can inspire that, and we can feel the joy and aliveness, and that and there's something about when we're healing our sisterhood wounds, and then we're able to speak our truth, and we're in the circle of loving, nurturing energy with other women, we get to reclaim that. We get to experience it, and then it's like, oh, it feels so good.
That's a really, I think you just spoke to a really important piece of it too, is that healing of the sisterhood, which you're clearly so devoted to, and I want to really acknowledge and honor you for your work in that realm, because yin nourishes yin. So in Chinese medicine, they talk about yin nourishing yin, or you can think of it as Shakti feeding Shakti. It's the feminine nourishing the feminine, and really together as women is where the magic really happens, right? There's been such a long period of this kind of, top dog, lone wolf, everybody competing to, get their piece of the pie. Whatever it's been kind of this, silly paradigm that has brought us to where we are on the earth these days, right, with a lot of destruction and a lot of loneliness. And so to heal those wounds of kind of the lost sisterhood, and to really, like, I think, like, all women should be doing their their business meetings and their different ways of working our businesses. If you're an entrepreneur, whatever we can do in the sense of, like, show up in our PJs together with our sisters for our mastermind meetings, or the mastermind group that I'm a part of just here locally, we go and we have tea and sit on the floor and drink warm tea, and it's just this super cozy, sweet, very much affectionate and supportive and encouraging. And it's so important that we really honor and prioritize the being with other women, and being with other women in that kind of playful, joyful, embodied, sweet state. Yeah, I love it. It's actually my favorite. I keep saying I just need to live with a whole bunch of women.
Yeah. And so this past week, with the when women were meeting in Sistership Circle, one group actually, during the break, they always do some kind of movement, and they put on head, shoulders, knees, and toes.
Oh, cute! Oh, I was just doing that with my boy the other day.
Yeah, and then the other group, everyone was invited to bring a picture of their little girl and dress in pajamas, and then we had a bunch of toys, like a slinky and like the magic 8-ball, and it was just it's
Oh, that is
amazing.
so fun. Oh my God, that totally flashes me back.
Yeah, exactly. And so there was this lightness and this playfulness to the circle.
Yeah.
And especially like doing the movement of the head, shoulders, knees, and toes.
Mm,
And there's something about being silly that we don't give ourselves permission to do as adults,
right, right.
that loosens us up. And
Mhm.
then it's like we get out of our head. And
Right.
I think this is one of the most effective ways
Mm.
for us to really drop into our bodies as feminine leaders and to actually bring the feminine in is when we get silly and we just kind of let it go. We're not as stiff and we're not as like
Yeah.
focused and masculine and
Right.
get it done, you know. And I think this is the piece that we as women really bring to the planet, and this piece around role modeling that I keep coming back to. I'm so glad that
Yeah.
you know brought into this conversation of this is what the world needs.
Right.
The world needs us to lighten up.
Right. The world needs more joy, more play, more laughter, more silliness, more fun. And for our children to actually see that. So once again, the women coming in and our playful brothers as well, coming in and just really shaking things up literally as to how things get done, right? Because there can be this incredible, seriousness to business and this incredible seriousness to life. And so much of the magic is not really able to happen there, right? We may get things done or we may accomplish things, but it's kind of in this, very dry and sterile, non-fun environment. And so I think more and more, and I just love seeing this. It's just beautiful to watch what's happening with the whole fempreneur movement and the women's leadership movement. And there really is this sense of playfulness coming back in, of sisterhood certainly coming back in, of being really in our bodies and in our joy and in our femininity. So I think what's happening is it's needed to balance it all out, right? It's like we've kind of come from this system and this paradigm that's been so overly masculinated that's not even serving the men, right? It's not even serving the men anymore. It's been so over masculinated and over emphasizing masculine systems and structures and to-dos and competition and being the rational thinking and science and that this and that. And what our role is, I believe, as feminine leaders, is to help balance that all out with this aspect of the feminine that can, make mountains move, right? It still gets shit done. Excuse me. It still is getting things done, but it's doing it in a way that it has like a little bit more of like a flow and a circle and a spiral and a fun and a playfulness and a real invitation to enjoy the process. It's not so goal oriented to like, okay, work hard so we get there, and then maybe when we get there, right, whether there is retirement or heaven or whatever there is, so much of the old paradigm is like you work hard, you struggle, you kind of put your nose to the grinder and just, until you get there, and then maybe you can enjoy life. And that's the old paradigm. That is not serving anybody. So I really feel that the whole feminine movement is about the whole process, the whole journey. Like, make it a dance, make it fun, make it playful, make it something that we all get excited about getting up in the morning, right? And to model that to our kids, to show them that life actually is meant to be fun, that you don't have to grow up and grow old and grow cranky and boring, right? But that you can actually have this eternal zest for life and this eternal innocence and playfulness that just infuses the entire world, the entire planet with this radiance, with this love, with this yumminess, right? That just inspires everybody. Yeah.
And that brings me to something that I think I personally struggled with, and I think some other women struggle with. Because I didn't want to have kids. Two reasons mainly. One was that I didn't feel like I could protect my child from the big bad world, And that came from actually seeing children die in my life, and so there was a lot of I got blocked. There was a block and some stagnant energy there that I just didn't even. It was very traumatizing for me to see a 5-year-old classmate die, and then children die. When I was in my early 20s. And so that's the first piece, is I didn't feel like I want to protect a child, and so it felt very heavy to have a child. The other piece was around responsibility of, well, geez, if I'm going to be a mother, like, forget me, right? Like, I'll have to give up everything that I want and my independence, and I have to be responsible. So it felt, again, very serious.
Right.
And so one thing I'm hearing too is when you, for women, it doesn't have to be all that, right? Like, it can be fun and playful to be a mother. And it actually can bring more of that out of you.
Yeah.
So I'd love to hear from you if there's any other comment you want to make, but what's the best thing about motherhood for you?
Well, I've certainly struggled with both of those things. Definitely had a lot of fear my first. My first pregnancy, I actually had a nervous breakdown when I was 8 weeks pregnant. I was so terrified. I had experienced a lot of, overall my childhood was really good and loving, but there was certain experiences that were very, very traumatizing, and certain aspects of the family dynamics and, different things, and of course just the world that we live in, right? We can't control everything, and there's a lot of things, a lot of factors, and especially in modern day life, that are pretty big. So I think that is a really, really, really natural thing for all new parents to go through, and not just new parents, but just parents in general. That there's this, there's this knowing in our hearts that we are going to love this being more than anything we've ever loved in our lives, and that's, in my case, that's been my experience. Is that I've never loved anyone or anything as much as I love my children. So that being matched with, the truth and the reality that this world is transient, right? That this world, no matter how hard we hold on to those that we love, sooner or later our bodies go where their bodies go. And so there's something about surrendering to that that has been a really profound journey for me. Now I've been blessed and have not had any major traumas or illnesses or death with any of my children. So I haven't, actually faced that particular piece with my own children, but I have seen a lot of loss in my community and in, those that I love, and there's just something about facing that reality of life with love and with courage that it just kind of fortifies you in a way that you don't quite understand until you're actually, like, you'll see. I mean, I'm sure you're getting pieces of it now, like even just being pregnant, but as soon as you hold up, as soon as you hold that child of yours to your heart, there's such a level of devotion and care that just finds its equilibrium. It really finds the way that you can protect and care for them, right, without being so hyper cautious about it or overprotective that it's disabling for you, right? So it's always the stance. And then the piece about the the responsibility, that too is an eternal dance of the role of the parent, right? And I think more and more as we call back in the sisterhood, as we really recreate the tribe, that will also even itself out more. It's definitely something that's a lot more pronounced, I think, in our culture, because so many families are either single-parent families like myself, or even families that have both parents. A lot of times you're not living by extended family. There's not really the sense that there used to be, right, of the tribe, where it's like aunties and uncles all over the place, and you didn't have to pay someone to be with your kid all the time if you needed a break. So there's different parts of like the system and our structures that I think are even trying to rebalance and find a better, harmonious, more supportive place for new parents, because there can be a very overwhelming sense of isolation, and there can be this very overwhelming sense of, oh my God, I've lost my life. Once again, it's this dance, and for me, even though I'm a single mom, even though I'm the primary care provider for my children, my youngest one we have joint custody, so we split back and forth, but my other two I've raised almost entirely on my own, with very little involvement from their fathers, financially or otherwise. And so there were these moments, right, that were so incredibly isolating. You got to hear me you got to hear me in one of them on Monday. I was coming out of being sick for a week, and I really hit one of those points of like, oh my God, I need my tribe. Because it can be overwhelming. It can be really overwhelming. So for new parents, for even parents that are, have older kids, I think one of the biggest pieces is establishing that tribe, establishing that support system, really having the systems in place to support ourselves, because we're not meant to raise our kids alone. That's not actually how we're meant to be doing this, running our households on our own, raising our children alone. That's this construct of modern society that is not that healthy and can, overlead to that feeling of like, oh my God, I don't have a life outside of being a mother, because there can be some truths in that. So once again, it's always about finding that balance. For me, it's about radical self-care. It's about doing the things that I know are going to keep me happy even outside of being a mother, right? So it's running a business that I love, being on my mission in the world. It's going dancing 2-3 times a week for me, just for me. These things that really nourish myself as a woman outside of my mother role. Finding that delicate balance.
Yeah. Yes. And we're wrapping up here. I just wanted to make one comment of that has been a huge intention of mine with my pregnancy, is really involving all the women who are locally here in Sistership Circle San Diego, and my community, my tribe, and really having people feel involved and connected to this little girl, and treating them all like they're the aunties and uncles, and putting together a 40-day meal train and support system, and just so important, and that's one reason why Sistership Circle is so important, that we get to create those bonds and really draw on the support of the circle. So yeah, but
all that you're doing with that, because I really feel like you are with Tribal Truth and with the Sistership Circle. It's like you're really, from the modern standpoint right now, you're really calling that all in, not only for yourself, but on a global scale. So love that.
Yeah. So in conclusion here, Renee, how do they reach out to you? Do you have anything coming up that that you can quickly share in your website?
Yeah, well, you can always go and visit my website, which is www.renee, R-E-N-E-E, Jeffus, Jeffus.com. And you can go and spend some time there. I've got a Work with Renee that has some listings of the different things that I have going on. I have a Revolutionary Radiance group program coming up in just a couple weeks, so that's something that you could jump in on. And I also work privately and then hold retreats. So there's always something yummy to jump into. You can sign up on my newsletter. Immediately you'll get a free ecstatic embodiment meditation, which is just this yummy downloadable 15-minute meditation that is really helpful tool for getting into your body, into your pleasure, and into your radiance. So I'd love to connect with all of you further. It's been a real joy to be here with you, Tanya, and to serve the Sistership Circle and the tribal movement that I love watching you so devotedly be a core creator part of. So.
Thank you. And for next week is our last one of the series, and we're talking with Jody England about death and rebirth rebirth. So like a phoenix out of the ashes, which it's great. You know, Renee has set us up really powerfully to talk about completion and impermanence and this thing that is really hard for us as a society to confront is this idea of death and loss. So next week will be awesome, where we're talking about both death and rebirth. So join us next week, and thank you for being here. Again, you can go to sistershipcircle.com/inspiration to grab all of the 12 interviews that we've done, and we'll see you next week. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.